What's going on, everybody? It's Afro Think Tank. Okay, so we're gonna now watch part 2. All right, hopefully you've watched part 1. All right, with Richard Wolff talking about the decline of capitalism, the decline of the West, the decline of white superiority, white power, right? Western hemisphere, the decline, and why we are declining. All this stuff could have been avoided, but it just seems like the people who are in charge have yet to learn the lessons from their brethren, throughout history, recent history, as all Western societies seem to have fallen for the same reason: the greed of white men and the lack of progression in society, because people get comfortable where they are. So anyway, without further ado, let's listen to the second half of this lecture, and you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. Anyway, so all I gotta say is Afro Think Tank, learn something, teach something. I'm out.
Why? Everything I've told you tonight, you knew anyway. There's nothing new here. I'm just putting it together in a way that you kind of now have to look at it, don't you? Your coffee is going up. You notice that. The latte costs you more. Part of the excuse for that, coffee comes from other places. The United States can't grow coffee. A little bit in Hawaii, a little bit in Louisiana, but not enough to make a difference. And we consume one hell of a lot of coffee. And that mostly comes from Brazil. And so the excuse is, well, the tariff on coffee coming in. Those businesses have no need of that. They got a tax cut. Took care of that for them. This is just grab it because you can. And the American people are upset that the money flowing out of their wallets to pick up that coffee once or twice a day is adding up. And they're kind of noticing. This is not going to stop, folks. If the Supreme Court decides, which it's scheduled to do this week, that those tariffs are illegal, but they are, by the way. The United States Constitution says that the House of Representatives is where all taxing is to be done. They have the authority. They had nothing to do with it. Mr. Trump just did this, like he's killing those people in the narco boats. And he knows something that my growing up in a very Catholic community, we all learned it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. If you think about that, you'll understand why that's a popular saying in certain communities. Okay. 30 years ago, the relationship between what an executive got at a big corporation and what the average worker got was about 35 to 1. Go back to the 60s and 70s, that was normal. What is the relationship now? About 300 to 1. Do you understand? The executives, the employers, raised their income much, much higher than it raised yours. They don't have an affordability problem. You may. They don't. That's the message here. To say it now in the way I started. When an empire goes down, we have seen in every example of which there is a record, that the people at the top, those with the money and those with the power, hold on to their wealth and are in a position to do it. Which means the cost of the decline is offloaded, doesn't fall on them. It falls on us, on the rest of the people. And it takes the form of an affordability crisis. The fundamental confrontation you have to face then is that the people who ran this empire are in the best position to hold on to the wealth it acquired, and that's what they're doing. And to you, they give a very large middle finger. And the only question, the only one worth asking, is whether you will tolerate it or not. All the rest are details. Here's a detail that was surfaced yesterday, out of the mouth of our president, who, because he doesn't understand much of this, mumbles stuff, which is very instructive because the normal kind of person who sits in his position knows that you don't say these things. These are kept quiet. So he announced a great breakthrough, a 50-year mortgage. I don't know if you caught this, but let me be sure you did. The normal mortgage in this country, long-term mortgage, is 30 years. Rarely do they go beyond that. You can get a 5, a 15, a 10, up to 30 years. And for those of you not clear about it, all of it, mortgage is the name of a loan, just a particular kind of loan. But there's nothing to it other than a loan. A mortgage, somebody lends somebody money to buy a house or a home. So we call it a mortgage. Just like if it's a tax on an imported product, it's a tariff rather than just a word tax. Okay, so if you have 30 years to pay back a loan to buy a house, then each year, roughly speaking, you've got to pay back the creditor 1/30th of the value of the loan plus interest. So that over 30 years, you've paid it back. Obviously, if people are having trouble with their house, here's what we can do. We can lend it to you for 50 years, which means from the time you graduate high school till the day you die, you'll owe money. Lots of it. This is helping you. Mr. Trump is helping you. What he doesn't mention is those extra 20 years, you'll have to be paying interest, which means the house will cost you way more with all of that added interest than it would have if you'd paid it off in 30 years. You poor schmuck. That's how the government, I want you to understand how you look to them. And ask yourself whether they deserve the respect that is asked of you. This is not a solution. This is more of the same game. The president ought to be called what my parents used to call people like this, the flim-flam man. The one who comes in with a great deal you really got to have right away. Quick, before you understand what's going on, give me some money. What is going to happen here? This has been going on for a while, folks, and it's not stopping. And there's nothing the United States can do. You've got to understand that, because most of the causes of this lie outside the control of the United States. Mr. Maduro in Venezuela, who has a lot to be worried about, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, full of bombs and planes, the Gerald R. Ford by name, for those of you who pay attention, has just entered the Venezuelan area. This is usually a setup. The United States has moved troops to a number of bases that are within half an hour, 45-minute air flight to Venezuela. Venezuela is a small, poor country that has been subject to sanctions by the United States for decades now. Not as long as Cuba, but for decades. This is all very familiar. You put a lot of sanctions, you hobble the country, and then you do provocations, and then the CIA does its thing, and then you invade. And that's called the Monroe Doctrine, to clean it up. All right, Russia has announced that it will not permit that to happen. Whoa. Did you hear what I just told you? Russia has announced no more Monroe Doctrine. No more agreeing that the Western Hemisphere is the United States' place. Now, what does that mean? Who knows? But the world is changing. Nobody did that before, including the Russians. Russia and China together, folks, is now a much bigger, richer economic powerhouse than we are. I left it to last because I know in America it scares people. But in economics, we make a little calculation, a kind of a shorthand. We get a measure of the total output of goods and services in a country in one calendar year, 12 months. And we call that the GDP, the gross domestic product. You'll hear it referred to in radio and television all the time. And we compare countries to get a sense of how big they are. To give you an idea, the United States GDP is now in the neighborhood of $25 trillion, give or take. The GDP of Russia, 3 or 4 trillion. You understand? Russia was never an economic threat to the United States. Not when it was the Soviet Union, and not now. If you thought that, it's the same problem. You live in a political, ideological fog. Not your fault. What air are you going to breathe other than the air all around you? So that's what you breathe. And that's what you take in your brain. So the United States has no economic issue with Russia. Not at all. Never did. What is the GDP of the People's Republic of China? United States, 25. United States is 25. Russia, say 4. China, 18 or 19. Okay? Russia and China are closer together as allies and friends than they have ever been right now. And they have an alliance with a dozen other countries, more than a dozen, but I'll use a dozen, called the BRICS. When you see that referred to in the newspaper, pay attention. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That is the alliance, the center of which is the People's Republic of China. If you add up the GDP of all the BRICS countries, China, India, all of them, it works out to about 35% of the total output of the world, of our whole planet. Just those countries. If you do the same for the United States and the G7, that's the big alliance of the United States. That's the United States, Canada, Japan, Britain, France, Germany, and Britain. Total GDP of the G7 is about 28% of the world's output. So do you understand that Russia-China is a much, much bigger, richer core of the world economy? We are not what we were. Not even close. The two were the same. The GDP of the two blocks were the same in the year 2020. And since then, the gap has grown always in the favor of the People's Republic of China. The United States has tried everything to stop it. Everything has failed. This year, 2025, the Chinese economy will grow, GDP, about 3 times what the United States will grow, and that has been the norm for the last 40 years. Last step. Unspoken until now, one last dimension of all of what I've been describing. Another sign of a declining empire is the inability of the political system to manage the economic system in a way that's acceptable to the people who live there. That's why so often as empires decline, they break up inside. The different parts of the empire fight against one another, actually accelerating the decline of the empire. They don't hold their unity they begin to dissolve. For the last 40 years, the United States has been unable to pay directly for its own functioning, which is why we have gone from 35 years ago, when our national debt was a few $100 billion, to our current situation where the national debt is $36 trillion. This is an amount of money borrowed that the world had never seen before. The United States owes more money than any other country on earth, and they're not close. Year in and year out, the government of the United States doesn't raise taxes, but spends a lot of money. And the only way it can do that is if it borrows the money with which to spend, since it's not raising the taxes. Why is it not raising the taxes? Because corporations and the rich have purchased the political system. They give money to the politicians who do not tax them. That's why the first thing Mr. Trump did when he was president the first time was to get the tax bill of 2017. And the first thing he did this time on his second presidency was the big, beautiful tax bill I just mentioned to you. He's taken care of business. He's taken care of his donors. And the Democratic Party does pretty much the same thing. Not as aggressively, not as big. They can always have that T-shirt on with a finger pointing at Trump saying, we're not as bad as him. Which is, by the way, their electoral strategy. Which last Tuesday suggested isn't working so well anymore. It's so bad, the borrowing, that the world has taken a step in the last 2 years, and I'm going to close with that. The world has taken a step that no one foresaw because no one wanted to see what it means that the empire is over. There are 3 companies that rate the credit worthiness of all borrowers, all corporations, all governments. One is called Standard & Poor, another one is called Moody's, and a third one is called Fitch. They are the 3 companies, all American, who will tell you the credit worthiness of a county in Myanmar and of a factory in China and so on. That's their job. They measure. All 3 of them have now dropped the credit rating of the United States from AAA, which is the best, to AA. The United States used to be AAA. Are there other countries that have AAA? Yes, quite a few. But not this one. You live in a country that is no longer safe to lend money to. And the big banks and insurance companies, the foreign countries who are the big lenders to the United States, you don't know much about it because few of you in this room, I'm guessing I'm right about this, correct me if I'm wrong, but few of you are in the habit of lending big bucks to the United States government. In other words, you have no idea what I'm talking about because it's not about you. If you're not a billionaire, you're not in this operation. So now the United States has a new problem. It solved its difficulties for the last 30 years by borrowing wild amounts of money, and now it can't do that anymore, like every creditor, every borrower who goes too far. Can't do it. Why are the creditors worried? Because they're worried for the same reason that they worry about all the other countries that borrow and then hit a moment when they don't or can't borrow anymore. Here's when that moment happens, and you'll see how close we are. It's when masses of people go into the streets of these countries and shake their fingers at their leaders, and they say, you're not taking care of our food and our clothing and our shelter and our schools and our medical care because you're saving money to pay off the rich people you borrowed from. We won't let you starve our children, remember Andrew, in order to pay off the rich. Our children can't eat, so your mansion can have another layer of gold paint? Really? You know what happens at that moment? The leaders have a sudden change of heart, and they call up the creditors and they say, we can't pay. We can't. And even more important, we won't. One of the countries that does this on a regular basis and gets away with it because it knows how to play politics is a country called Argentina. 2 weeks ago, they did this game again. The right-wing crazy person, I don't use that term, but if you want to see a leader who's genuinely right off his noggin, go look at Mr. Milei in Argentina. He announced, we're bankrupt and we have no money and we can't repay our creditors. Mr. Trump gave him, dependent, a little unclear, somewhere between 20 and 40, ready? $1 billion. Way more money than it would have needed to take care of all the people on SNAP. In order to save him, because he's a right-winger, he likes Trump. To save him, he did that. And the United States, in most cases, Republicans and Democrats alike, whistle, look at the moon, check their underwear. That's what they did. But what is this? Now the United States has to look at least like it's doing something. And that's what we're living through. Can we stick it to the federal employees? Let's try that. Can we stick it to the SNAP people? Let's try that. Let's do this. Let's try that. How about a 50-year mortgage? I mean, it is everything but looking at the question. So here are the two things just to end with. The government could be called in to do all kinds of things to solve this problem. Things that our political leaders do not even venture. Although, because he deserves it, Mr. Mamdani does. He talks about taxing the rich a little. He talks about bringing rents down. He's addressing affordability, which was a theme of his campaign and had something to do with the extraordinary vote that he got. For those of you that are not familiar, he got more than half the vote, which means Mr. Mamdani got more votes than all of the other candidates combined. That's an amazing achievement. It tells you about New York and solves all kinds of questions about New York that everybody ought to think about, whatever happens in the future. What can the government do? The government can bring down the rent. Take 2 seconds to do that. How do I know that? Because here in the United States, before World War II, remember when we didn't have the Cold War? Hundreds of American cities, just in case you're not familiar with American history, hundreds of cities had socialist mayors. That's not a new phenomena in our country. Not at all. Big cities, Milwaukee, Bridgeport, Connecticut, all kinds of cities had socialist mayors. State legislators had huge numbers of socialists sitting on those legislators. I used to have fun asking my students. I'll ask you now. Can you guess which of the 50 states was the one in which socialists had the biggest block of seats that they won in elections? You won't guess. So I'll tell you. Oklahoma. Yeah, Oklahoma. What was red can be blue, and vice versa. Don't be so quick to assume that it is forever what it is now. Wasn't the case. But even if there were a government committed, and let's give Mr. Mamdani the benefit of the doubt, they too will have to make the final confrontation. Are you going to allow the ruling class of this country, the people who sit at the top, the CEOs, the super rich, the leading politicians, to continue to protect the wealth of those who already have at the expense of everybody else? Either you are or you aren't. The university where I work here, the new school, which I teach at from time to time, sent us all an email this last week. I don't know if it's public. I don't care either. It explained to us that next year they will admit 0 graduate students, with one exception, the psychology department. Every other department, I'm in the economics department, will have no graduate program anymore. That's all. No more. All over the country, people are not going to colleges and universities. Many of them are going to close. You better, if you have relatives or friends, they're going to hear about it. Why? Because the people in power, Harvard and Yale, are going to continue. I know, I get their memos because I'm an alumnus of that place. They're rolling in money. They always were. They assume the universe is organized in that way. They're fine. It's all the little schools, the state school. They're closing left and right. Americans can't afford it. It's another affordability problem. It's very expensive, and the only way you can do it is load up with levels of debt, which will look really good alongside your 50-year mortgage. And foreigners aren't coming here anymore. Why? Because our crazy president, desperate, went international in April and declared economic war against everybody, the whole world. Do you realize, and if not, let me be the one to tell you, every foreign leader, good ones, bad ones, and in between, now has an easy way to go to his or her people when there's a problem in their economy and say, we call Mr. Trump and he hit us with the tariffs and I was doing great, but it's all his fault. If you think Americans are not desirable around the world, wait 6 months, a year from now. It should be really stunning. The British Secret Service, who have committed every crime there is and many more, told the United States yesterday that they would no longer share intelligence with the United States because of the killing of those 76 people in the narco boats, because that violates international law, British law, American law, and fill in the blank every other law. The British have done that all the time. But now they get a chance, and they were not going to miss it, to point the finger somewhere else. We are in a very bad position. When I sit down and have a coffee or a drink with my fellow economists, left-wingers like me, right-wingers, and folks in the center, we don't agree on how the United States got into the current situation, and we don't agree on how to get out. But this is what we agree on. This is the worst condition of the American economy in our lifetime. That we all agree. That calls for basic change. You're not going to solve this, not with this election or that one, or this law or that regulation. We're way beyond all of that. It's like a doctor having to tell you, look, take an aspirin, take 2, take 6, but that's not going to solve your problem here. May make the pain go away for a little while. More power to you. But you got to deal with this other because it's going to get progressively worse. We're living in a country that is excluding people from educations, story of the new school, from food stamps, from proper management of the airport, from everything, education, And the impact of all of these cuts, that takes a while. Many of the people worked, I don't know if you're familiar with the federal government, because they had time coming to them even after they're no longer on the payroll. So it takes time for all, but that's coming now over the next little while. And the elections last Tuesday are a strong indicator that the acceptance of what's going on is not going well for Mr. Trump. And given who he is and the people around him, that means more desperate acts of the quality of a 50-year mortgage. So I'll stop there, and if you have some questions or comments, I'll be glad to try to deal with them.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan!
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.